All right, welcome to Studio B. I am your host, Pastor MDH. Thank you so very much for joining us here on the set. We're so thankful for your viewership and your followership. And remember, wherever you're watching us from, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, like, comment, follow, and subscribe so that you don't miss anything from the set of Studio B. Today, I'm going to continue with what we started last week, but I'm going to make a special plea to the ladies who follow us here on Studio B, who tune in each and every week to our podcast and to our 10-minute table talks. I want to talk directly to you for a moment. When you're talking about women, we are all familiar with the women's suffrage movement. If you're not familiar with the women's suffrage movement, it is the longest movement in American history that took over 100 years to bring women to a place of equality in these United States of America. It was a decade-long fight to win the right to vote for women in the United States. And on August the 18th, 1920, it was finally ratified with the 19th Amendment, giving women the full opportunity and full rights of voting here in these United States. Now, if you just look at the history of our world, but in more particular context, the history of our nation, women have always played a very large part in the development of these United States. But just like with anything else, women have evolved. They come from a very subservient role back in the early times to having to fight for the right to sit at the table and to get some of the equalities that men have long since fought for, long since had and enjoyed. And I've had a couple of conversations with some women here over the last couple of months, last year or so, to ask you guys the question, why are you not more frustrated? Why are you not kicking up dust with all of the melee with gender transition? So as if a man who does not have the issues and the things that women have to deal with can just jump out of his gender and into a woman's gender and fully assume the rights of a woman, even though he is not biologically a woman, but he is afforded all of the rights and opportunities of a woman by which he is clearly not. So it seems to me like in that particular instance of what we are fighting right now with gender fluidity and gender dysphoria and transitioning and trans and all of these different things that we're fighting with today, it seems as though to me that women would be a little bit more up in arms than what they are, because it takes a lot to be a woman. It takes a lot to be a woman. And you can't just jump out of your skin and jump into another skin and then assume that particular person just because you feel like it. And if we're having deep and honest dialogue and conversations in situations like this, I've often asked the question, if you're going to be a woman, then why not have the whole woman? Why not have all of the things that come along with womanhood? As a person that has a man that has 3 daughters and a wife, so it's 6 of us in my household. Me and my son are the only testosterone walking around our house. So I'm filled and surrounded by estrogen all the time with my 3 daughters and my wife. And so I am very, very familiar with the processes of a woman's body and what she goes through, some of the mood swings that may happen and all of those things, for I've been dealing with those things for quite a number of years. So I'm very, very familiar with this particular portion of our dialogue. But it's always interesting to me when I'm looking at how women have fought for the right to get to the table and then have those rights usurped by someone who has not fought equally for those rights. So now you're fighting for the rights of transgender or gender fluidity when you were just now been granted the full equal access of what you've been fighting for decades. And this is a crazy kind of a time that we're in right now when you're looking at where we are in society. Like the things that used to just be common knowledge, common fact, without a lot of debate, without a lot of melee surrounding them, have now just been turned topsy-turvy, just turned on top of their heads. And so now we're in a time right now to where we are saying obvious untruths and claiming them to be true when we obviously know that they are not. When we obviously know that they're not. The women's suffrage movement was a great movement in these United States that resulted in the equal access of women. And so when you're looking at today's culture in 2022, when we have men who are biological men, who were born men, jump out of their skin as biological men, and then usurp their role into a women's role and then dominate that women's space. Like you never see a woman transitioning to a man and then going to play men's sports. You never see somebody from the WNBA saying, I'm going to go play in the NBA. That's the reason why we have two different basketball sections. We got the NBA, which is the men, and we got the WNBA, which is the women. And that is for a reason, because the women cannot play in the NBA. But you always see men transitioning into women, and then we'll go and dominate a woman's sport, and then women say nothing about it. Like women don't even kick up any dust about it. They don't complain about it. Like this man who is clearly a man jumps into a woman's role and then dominates that space for women. And so the very thing that you have been fighting for over 100 years is now coming back full circle, and you don't recognize the fight is right back up in your face because you don't kick against that particular narrative. The young man now, and praise God that he was, banned from the Olympics. Lia, the 6'3" swimmer, who was 175th as a male swimmer, 175th as a male swimmer, transitions a year before the collegiate trials and becomes number one in the sport of swimming amongst women. 175th amongst women, amongst men, first amongst women. And for the fight that it took for equality, and to get to the table, women are now just letting that stuff pass. And when I talked to you last week about our children and how all of this stuff that we are facing today in our culture today, the Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter number 3, there's nothing new under the sun. Like there's nothing new. However, even though the strategy or the end game is not new, the strategy is. But it accomplishes the same thing. It accomplishes the same thing. It's just wrapped in different packages. When you're looking at where we are right now in our society, we're at a place to where the culture, the nation that we know in 50 years is not going to look like it is now. Now, for those who are on the backside of their life, you can see the cross sticking out of the ground. You've lived your life. You're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. You got kids. You got grandkids. You've worked your 40 years. You're in retirement. You've done it X, Y, and Z. Wherever you may be, you may not be too concerned about the next 50 years of living here on earth because you're not going to be here. I get that. Well, I don't get that, but that's the reasoning. But for those people like myself who have kids and yet to be grandkids, we are concerned about what this world is going to be like when they get here. Like, what type of world are we going to hand to them? What's the baton that we're going to put into their hands? And if you look at every previous generation has left the world in a better place as they exited off the scene, with the exception of our generation. Because we are failing. We are failing. We're going to hand the baton. And once we hand the baton, the world is going to be worse than when we were living in the world. In the next 50 or so years, you're going to see culture begin to start to shift, as it already has, but it's going to shift on its axis, and you're not going to even be able to recognize it. I'm going to say something that may seem a bit controversial, but I don't think it's too much out of the ordinary to say that there's a very real possibility that the capitalist society in America could be done away with. that the shores of America, which were the target of every immigrant in every foreign nation because of the opportunities that are presented here in America, to start from nothing and end with something that is very unique to the shores of America, I think that can be topsy-turvy in the next 50 to 60 years. You don't see 1.3 million migrants trying to get into Canada. You don't see 1.3 million migrants trying to get into Mexico. You don't see 1.3 million migrants trying to go to Europe. You don't see 1.3 million migrants trying to go to China. But you see people risking life and limb, walking extreme measures, doing extreme things just to get to the shores of the United States of America, because they understand America affords opportunities unlike any other place on the planet. But there's a real time coming that I believe that the culture of America is going to be so disturbed that this once prosperous nation that allowed everybody and anybody to come over and make a name for themselves, change generational trajectory, and amass fortunes and well-beings for their family, that is going to not look the same on the course that we're currently on. Because truth will always stand. Lies will always eventually crumble. I need you to hear that. Truth will always stand, but what is built on a lie will eventually crumble. The most important part about a house is not how it looks on the outside. It's not about the windows. It's not about the doors. It's not about your beautiful landscape. It's not about the brick. It's not about the roof. It's not about any of that. The most important part to any house is the foundation of that house. If you've ever gone down to Tornado Alley in Kansas and in Oklahoma, where unfortunately, 5 tornadoes, the Tornado 5, have just wiped through a community, you'll see entire homes decimated, and all that's left is the foundation. The entire house is gone, piping and everything, because the most important part of any house is the foundation. And if the foundation is not correct, then the house will eventually fall. And that's what's happening right now in America, because we have people who do not embrace, shun truth at every single moment and at every single time in their lives. And so the very thing that was not Republican or Democrat or Christian or non-Christian, was just basic truth, has now been distorted. It has now been distorted. And what is clearly a lie, whether you are on the right, the left, red, blue, purple, yellow, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you stay in the hood, whether you stay in an affluent neighborhood, truth was just truth, and it was just universally accepted. But now you're literally living in a time to where everything that is truth is being questioned. And my question to you is, how long do you think that's going to last? How much weight can you put on that foundation before it just cracks and crumbles? Like, how much weight can you put on it? That's where we are right now in our time. And those of us, and I make absolutely no apology about it. I love this country. This country has been terribly good to me and my family. It has allowed me to establish a great life. I have done far and exceedingly above what my ancestors did. I have built on their legacy, on their history, on their sacrifice, and have tried to do homage to the pain and suffering that they had to endure, and have tried to do the best that I could possibly do in my generation to add to that legacy. So America has been very, very good to me. America is not without its flaws. But no doubt for me, I wouldn't live any other place. But we're living in a time right now to where my kids, who are just getting ready to launch into life, coming out of college and getting their feet kind of settled up under them, getting ready to enter into the workspace and to the world of commerce, and begin to start to get into relationships and get married and eventually have kids and all of the things that come along with life. I'm concerned about what it'll look like for them. And I understand that this is par for the course. I do understand that. But this is unlike any other time in human history where we celebrate, we embrace that which is obviously false. So when you're seeing all of this stuff about gender fluidity and transgenderism and, you know, the gender assigned at birth and all of this other language that begins to start, you know, being thrown around that really doesn't make any sense when you really start to think about it. It is really not just an assault on God, which is ultimately where the assault is. But I'll leave that for another time and talk to you simply from the space of where is this going to leave us in 50, 60, 100 years. Now, wherever your opinion may be, I think we can all agree that kids are innocent. And when I say innocent, I don't mean without sin, because we were born in sin and shaped in iniquity. However, as a parent, our job is to protect our children because they are not emotionally stable to handle complicated issues. And so we then, as parents, make decisions for our children because they are not mentally able to make those decisions for themselves. So as parents, we have to a lot of times, think on behalf of our children to keep them from hurt, harm, and danger. So we say stuff like, no, you can't go there because that spot that you want to go is a dangerous area of town and I don't want you over there. You need to be in at this particular time because we know stuff happens after this time and I don't want to subject you to that type of possibility. We don't want you dumping into the 10 feet of the pool when you can't swim. So we make decisions for our children because intellectually they are not able to make those decisions for themselves. But now you have 9 and 10-year-olds saying, and even as early as 6, if a boy is 6 and goes to his parents and says, I feel like I'm a girl, the parent, the adult, who obviously knows that's not true, thinks on behalf of the child to protect that child because they're not intellectually, mentally able to figure that stuff out. So the parent, therefore, comes in and steps in front of the child to guide the child. Now, think about this. Your 6-year-old comes and says, Mom, Dad, your 6-year-old son comes and says, Mom, Dad, I feel like I'm a girl. And I want to start wearing dresses and I want to live my life as a girl. The 40-something-year-old parent who's been on the earth 40 plus years, who's experienced life, who has brain development, who has an emotional mindset, who has an emotional history. You have reasoned through some very difficult times in your life. You're 40 plus years on this earth. You look at your 6-year-old child who's only been on the earth for 6 years, whose brain is not fully developed at all, and say to that 6-year-old child, I understand, I'm going to help you be whatever you want to be. But if he came to you and said, you know what, Mom, I want to live my life as Spider-Man. I want to live my life as Spider-Man. I was researching online where you can have a surgery on your wrist and have webs inserted into your wrist because I want to live life as Spider-Man. I believe I am Spider-Man. The parent then says, hold on, baby. You may like Spider-Man, but you're not Spider-Man. I want to be the Incredible Hulk. Mom, Dad, I was looking at this process by which I can dye my skin green because I really feel like I'm the Incredible Hulk and I want to live life as the Incredible Hulk. The parent obviously sees the folly in that argument and says, son, no, we're not going to do that. But on the other side of it, your son, your daughter can come and say, hey, I'm not who I am. I want to live life as a boy, even though I'm a girl. I want to live life as a girl, even though I'm a boy. And the parent with intellectual capability, who obviously knows that there's something wrong with that, says nothing about that particular issue. And as a matter of fact, will then allow the 9, 10-year-old, 11-year-old to take hormone blockers as a young boy to stop the process of puberty from happening. How is that not child abuse? Why would any doctor make a life-altering surgery on a child? Like if a child was suffering with cancer and they had to eliminate that cancer by surgery, they got to go through all of these different protocols because this is a child. But yet in the same sense, we will allow a 10-year-old to change gender and take hormone blocking pills that is not only going to alter his physical chemistry, but going to alter his body forever. And we don't say nothing. But then you want to tell me that an 18-year-old is not mentally able to go into a store and buy a gun because he doesn't have the rationale to understand what he says. Therefore, we need to raise the legal limit from 18 to 21 to buy a gun because an 18-year-old cannot reason enough of why he shouldn't have a gun. That's the argument for guns. But if a young boy wants to transition to a girl at 10, there's no protocol. Take him to the doctor, get the hormone blockers. Let's cut him off. Let's castrate him. Let's let him live life as he wants to. How is that not child abuse? When you're obviously doing a disservice to the child and you're supposed to be the one that is protecting the child. Listen, I understand as a parent that my children make horrible decisions. I made horrible decisions as a child. I made decisions based on how I felt, based on what was going on, what my friends was doing, the environment. I made a lot of decisions in the moment that didn't turn out well. But as a parent, I understand that I can't affirm my child's foolishness. But we are allowing this stuff. We put prints like this in circulation from ages 10 and up that says, you know what, changing your body is okay. Jumping out of your maleness and assuming life as a female, it's okay. It's okay. It's perfectly normal to do that. And everybody, where have we arrived if we're not going to stand up for kids? Like, where have we landed if we will not stand up for children? The measure of any society is how it treats its two most vulnerable groups. The measure of any society is how it treats its two most vulnerable groups. And that is infants and elderly, children and our old. And how we treat these two has been detrimental in our society. I want to show you something. I have been trying to sound the alarm for some time now. But I think I'm at a place. I think we're at a place to where if we don't get some sanity built within the fabric of our society, we're going to lose a generation. I was sharing with a group last couple of weeks ago that with the issue of bulimia, we treat bulimia with medications, with therapy, because we obviously know that there is an emotional disorder. Someone who is bulimic is someone that has a severe emotional disorder involving the distortion of their body image. So they weigh 100 pounds, but they feel as though they're 250 pounds. So they have an emotional disorder that's causing them to look at their body in a way that everybody else except that person can see. So they have this excessive desire to lose weight. And then they look at themselves in ways that is obviously not true. So you have this person that's 100 pounds that says, when I look in the mirror, I see a 200-pound person, but you're 100 pounds. So what we have done is said that person with bulimia, that is obviously an emotional disorder that we need to treat. Because we have compassion for that person that sees themselves opposite to who they really are. Regardless of what you may see or think, you're not 200 pounds, you're 100 pounds. The mirror is not lying to you. Something is going on in your mind that is causing you to see yourself in that way. So we treat them because we have care and concern for them. But then equally, we have a person that says, I believe that I'm a guy, but I'm a girl. I believe that I'm a girl, but I'm a guy. An obvious emotional disorder of something that is going on mentally, psychologically, as opposed to treating that person with care and concern, we rubber stamp what we know to be untrue, to the detriment of that person. And I think we're in a place right now to where if we don't get some sanity around this issue, we're going to lose a generation, a whole generation of people that has been lost because men and women who knew the truth decided not to say anything. So everybody, I want to thank you for joining us here on the set of Studio B, man. I'm going to be continuing this. I got a guest coming in week after next, maybe next week, but for sure week after next, a licensed psychologist who deals with issues of the mind and how to walk through deep emotional trauma and stress. We're going to talk to her and see what she has to say about this issue as she deals with a lot of these cases on a daily and weekly basis. I know it may ruffle a lot of feathers because I know anytime you're speaking truth to power, that you have the propensity to ruffle a couple of feathers. Do understand that. I do understand that. However, Jesus said that you are the salt and the light of the earth. Salt preserves and light exposes. What is going on in the evil attack and agenda against our children is straight from the pits of hell itself. And somebody has got to stand up and say something. So everybody, I hope that when you stand before your maker on that great getting up day, that you're one of the ones who can raise your hand and say, God, I spoke when you told me to speak. I stood up boldly and confirmed and confessed what you placed upon my heart to do. I tried my best to insert truth in the midst of error so that you can be found faultless on that day. I pray because our children need people that are going to stand up for them. They need adults who are trusting adults to do well and to do best by them. Not to help them in their folly. So everybody, I want to thank you for joining us here on the set of Studio B. Remember, like, follow, share, comment, get all in the comments. Let's talk about it. Until we see you next week, God bless you.